Alright, welcome back to this video. We're going to be finishing up on transpiration, and we're turning our attention now to the question, what factors affect the rate of transpiration? Now under the syllabus, we need to know 4 different factors that affect the rate of transpiration. We need to be able to explain how each of these factors affect the rate of transpiration. So it might look like a lot, but there's actually an easy way to remember it. And that's by thinking about drying clothes, right? If you've ever done laundry and helped with your mom with your laundry, then this is going to be quite easy. Because you see, the factors that affect the rate of drying are very similar to the factors that affect the rate of transpiration. Let me give you an example. We all know that if we dry our clothes at a higher temperature, then they dry faster, right? The rate of drying is higher. But it turns out it's the same thing for transpiration. The higher the temperature, the higher the rate of transpiration. Right, a different example, wind movement. The more windy it is, the faster your clothes will dry, right? Well, it's the same for transpiration. The greater your wind speed, the greater the rate of transpiration. That's one last example, would be time of day. Alright, so when's the best time to dry your clothes? Day or night? Day, right? So in the day, the rate of transpiration is also greater, right? Just like in the daytime, it's faster to dry your clothes. So we're going to move on now to explaining each factor. You need to be able to know how to explain them well. Alright, let's start with humidity. So for that, I need to look at my diagram here. Here's a leaf and the outside environment. Inside the leaf and outside environment. The blue dots represent water vapor. So what we can say to begin with is that the intercellular air spaces of the leaf are normally saturated with water vapor. Saturated means that it is a very high concentration of water vapor, much higher compared to the outside environment where there's a lower concentration of water vapor. So as a result, there's a water vapor concentration gradient between the leaf and the atmosphere. Right? Concentration of water vapor is high here compared to the concentration outside, so there is a concentration gradient. And as a result, water vapor would normally diffuse, right, from higher concentration to lower concentration. Now, as humidity increases, you must imagine that the atmosphere becomes more and more concentrated in water vapor, right? When it becomes more humid outside, there's more water vapor in the atmosphere. So now, as humidity increases, realize that the water vapor concentration gradient becomes less steep. The difference in concentration between inside the leaf and outside the leaf is much less, right? They're more equal now. So the rate of diffusion of water vapor will also decrease. Okay, therefore, the rate of transpiration decrease, right? Transpiration is really the same as the rate of diffusion of water vapor. Now the second factor is air or wind movement. So coming back to our diagram again, right, we see that the concentration of water vapor is usually much higher inside the leaf compared to outside the leaf where the concentration is lower. So normally, water vapor will diffuse from the region of high concentration to region of low concentration by transpiration. Okay, so diffuse like such, moving. Alright, now what the wind does is that it blows away water vapor that accumulates outside the leaf. You see, once water vapor has moved from a region of high to low concentration, now you can see that the concentration inside the leaf and outside the leaf are relatively equal. So diffusion will actually slow down or maybe even stop. However, the wind will blow away water vapor that accumulates outside the leaf. So imagine that it blows away these few particles, alright? So they are blown away. Imagine that they are gone. So this, as a result, maintains the concentration gradient between the leaf and the atmosphere. So now we're back again with a low concentration outside the leaf. So we maintain the concentration gradient and diffusion continues to happen. Transpiration continues to happen. Therefore, as wind movement increases, the rate of transpiration also increases because we blow away more and more of the water vapor that accumulates outside the leaf. The third factor is temperature. Now for temperature, it's quite simple. As temperature increases, the rate of diffusion and rate of evaporation increases. Alright, if we look back at our diagram here, we know that there was diffusion here, right? This is the diffusion of water vapor. And we know that this arrow here represents evaporation. Right? Water evaporating from the thin film of moisture to become water vapor. Now as the temperature increases, the rate of evaporation will increase, right? And the rate of diffusion will also increase because the water vapor particles, they gain more kinetic energy and they move faster and they're able to diffuse out faster. So as temperature increases, the rate of transpiration also increases. Okay? As temperature increases, rate of transpiration also increases. Now something that you might want to read up more on is this question of how do plants that live in very dry and hot conditions, right, reduce their rate of transpiration. You know, those plants that live in very dry desert environments, they run the risk of really losing too much water. So how do they conserve water? How do they prevent transpiration from happening at too fast a rate? So it's all down to the leaf structure, something interesting like this. And you can go read up more about it on this page in your textbook. One important example of a plant that does have adaptations for a dry environment is marram grass. Right, so if you take a look at the structure of marram grass, it'll be very, very interesting. But I'll leave that to you. Right, finally, the light and time of day also affects the rate of transpiration. And that's because light affects the size of stomata. So just bring back some of what we've learned in the previous lessons. In the daytime, stomata tend to be open or closed. Well, they tend to be open, right? Tend to be open for photosynthesis because we want to exchange gases with the environment. We want to take in carbon dioxide to carry out photosynthesis. And in the night, stomata tend to be closed. So when stomata are open, right, then the rate of transpiration will be higher, right? Because transpiration is a consequence of gaseous exchange. And when the stomata are closed, then the rate of transpiration will decrease. So what we can expect is that when there is light, stomata open, rate of transpiration increases. When there is less light, the stomata will close because there's not so much need for photosynthesis and rate of transpiration will decrease. Okay, so that's how light affects the rate of transpiration. Now we're almost at the end of the lesson and I want you to think about this question. What do you think happens to the plant when the rate of transpiration is greater than the rate of water absorption? So the plant is absorbing water and losing water vapor. What happens when it loses more water vapor than the water it can absorb? Well, the plant gets thirsty. Except we don't call the plants thirsty, we say that they actually undergo wilting. Right, so you get plants that look something like this. They start to wilt, start to sag, they start to sink down to the ground and they look that they're going to die. Right, so that's wilting. So wilting happens when the rate of transpiration is greater than the rate of water absorption. Right, that means the plant loses water vapor at a rate that is too fast to be replaced by the water being absorbed. Now what happens during wilting? You need to know how to explain wilting. So when a plant wilts, when it has a rate of transpiration greater than the rate of water absorption, then the mesophyll cells in both the leaf and the stem will start to lose water, right? Especially those in the leaves. And when those cells lose water, they lose their turgor or they lose their turgidity, right? The plant cells are usually very turgid, right? But now they lose their turgidity and they become flaccid and limp. right? And because the cells are flaccid, that's why you start to see the stem lose its firmness and it starts to sag, and the leaves start to droop, right? Because the cells are becoming flaccid. And the leaves also start to fold up, right? And they start to fold up, and there's a reduced surface area exposed to the sun, right? So the leaves start to droop down in that way. So is it the end when the plant wilts? Is this the end of the story? And the answer actually is no, right? If you can actually see it, if you have seen a plant wilt before, you can actually revive it very simply by adding more water to it. So the question then is, why do plants wilt? What's the point of wilting anyway? And I would want you to read your textbook to find out more. But what are the advantages and disadvantages of wilting? And here's a little hint for you. Wilting happens to be actually a survival response to the loss of water. When a plant loses too much water, it starts to wilt, and that wilting actually, in the short term, helps it to survive. The question is how, right? So go look up what are the advantages and disadvantages of wilting in your textbook, and we'll come back and discuss in class.